Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it waits, quiet, patient, right behind you. Tonight, we step into real nightmares whispered by those who survived, barely. I am Mr. Darkveil. Brace yourself. Welcome to Darkveil, Episode 2. If you dare continue this journey, subscribe and join the ones who listen in the dark. Story 1. I'm not even sure when it started. Maybe it was when I told Daniel we were over. Maybe it was before that, when his love started to rot into something that didn't feel like love at all. We'd only been together 6 months, but those 6 months started like most modern relationships do, with late-night texts and too many emojis, dinners that stretched into dawn, him brushing the hair from my face like he already knew he'd fall for me. And maybe he did fall, but not in any kind of way that was healthy, not in a way that let go. By month 4, I could feel his grip tightening, literally and otherwise. He started asking where I was going, who I was seeing, why I hadn't replied fast enough. At first, it felt flattering, that intensity, but then I'd catch him watching me while I slept, just standing in the doorway of my bedroom, still silent. He said it was because I looked peaceful. I started locking my bedroom door at night. He'd ask me why I didn't trust him. When I finally broke up with him, I didn't do it dramatically. I didn't scream or accuse or hurl objects like you see in the movies. I just told him, quietly, that I needed to breathe again. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just looked at me, almost amused, and said, "You'll come back. Or, I'll come back for you." I changed my phone number the next week, blocked everything, moved across town to a second-floor studio near the edge of the city. Tiny, but it was mine. For the first 2 weeks, it was perfect. I could actually breathe. I bought a new plant for the windowsill, lit candles again, played music without him commenting on every song, slept in silence. But peace doesn't last. It never does. The first thing I noticed was the light in the bathroom. I knew I turned it off before bed. I always do. It's a habit, one of the only ways I feel like I'm in control of something. But that morning, it was on. Faint buzz, yellowed bulb, humming like a wasp nest. I brushed it off. Next was the missing pair of yoga pants. I thought, maybe I left them at the gym. But then a hoodie vanished, one of my favorites, black and oversized. I tore through drawers, laundry, nothing. 2 days later, it was back in my closet. I remember holding it in my hands, and for some reason, I brought it to my face and inhaled. It smelled like cologne. His cologne. The same one he used to wear. I dropped it like it had burned me. I didn't sleep well that night. When it started happening more frequently, the ajar doors, the faint smell of food I hadn't cooked, the tiny sounds in the middle of the night. I started to think I was going crazy. I even booked a therapy session. I told myself it was just residual fear, trauma, PTSD, or whatever acronym makes paranoia sound more acceptable. But deep down, I didn't feel paranoid. I felt watched. Not just in a figurative sense, I mean watched. Like someone was in the room before I turned the lights on. Like someone was just beyond the edges of vision, waiting for me to blink. There were nights I would lie awake in bed, holding my breath, trying to hear something, anything, that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. And one night I did. It was past 2 a.m. when I heard breathing. Not snoring, not wind, not the pipes settling. Breathing, slow, ragged, like someone with a chest cold. The kind of breath that rattled at the back of the throat. It was coming from behind my bedroom mirror. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I finally took the mirror down. It wasn't heavy, just a wide vanity-style frame mounted above the dresser. When I pulled it off the wall, I nearly dropped it. Behind it, on the drywall, was a metal vent cover. Not a normal air vent. This was smaller, older, maybe something used for maintenance decades ago. A crawl space or electrical access. I don't know, I'm not a contractor. But it had been unscrewed. All 4 rusted screws sat neatly in a line at the base of the vent, like someone had taken their time with it, like they wanted me to find it eventually. I stood there, mirror propped against the dresser, and stared at the vent. I didn't move for a long time. I called the police. I thought maybe they'd laugh, or worse, tell me I was just stressed, emotional, imagining things. But they took one look at the vent, and their faces changed. 2 officers showed up. Male, mid-30s maybe. One of them radioed for backup the moment he peeked inside the crawlspace above my ceiling. They asked if I'd noticed anything missing. I told them about the hoodie, the lights, the breathing. Then they asked something that made my stomach turn cold. Has anyone ever had a key to this apartment besides you? I told them no. I changed the locks the day I moved in. There were no spares, no roommates. No one should have been able to get in. That's when they found the hatch. A square cut out in the ceiling of my hallway closet, hidden beneath an access panel. One of the officers climbed up with a flashlight. What he found made me sick. Food wrappers, water bottles, a blanket, and a journal. A small brown leather notebook with frayed edges. They let me see a few pages, only a few. Most were too disturbing, they said. But the entries I did read, they were written in Daniel's handwriting. I knew it. I knew it even before I saw the final line in the last entry. She still smells like mine. The police never found him. They said he must have escaped when I was at work or running errands. But here's the part that still keeps me up. There were no signs of forced entry, no tampered windows, no back door left open. They think he'd been in the apartment before I ever moved in. The crawl space connects to the roof. Maintenance records showed the previous tenant had reported noises above the ceiling, but nothing was ever done. Meaning, Daniel had been hiding up there the whole time. Watching me, living above me, breathing through the vent behind my mirror. I moved again, this time out of state. I don't use social media anymore. I changed my name on the lease. I keep a crowbar next to my bed and a camera aimed at the door. I still haven't told my parents the full story. What could I say? That love becomes something else when it's poisoned by obsession. That I'm afraid to sleep because I might wake up and see him standing in the doorway again. Or worse, not see him at all, but just know he's there, still breathing, still watching, still thinking I'm his. Because for someone like Daniel, breakups don't mean endings, they mean beginnings. And monsters don't hide under the bed, they hide above the ceiling. Story 2. Have never believed in curses or omens. I've always been the rational type, steady, methodical, the kind of guy who double-checks if the stove is off 3 times before leaving the house. But if you'd told me 6 months ago that I'd be afraid to check my mailbox, afraid to look out my own windows after dark, or scared to trust even the silence on a voicemail, I would have laughed. I'm not laughing anymore. It started with Sarah. We dated for almost 4 years. At first, it was the kind of love that made you feel like your lungs had just learned to breathe properly. She was intense, yes, passionate, even obsessive. But I thought that just meant she cared deeply. She memorized every detail of my life, from my morning coffee preferences to the exact freckle just above my left collarbone. At first, it was flattering. Then it became suffocating. She wanted to know everything. Who I was texting, where I was going, why I hadn't answered a message within 10 minutes. and when I wasn't forthcoming, she'd invent answers on her own. One night, I caught her holding my phone, scrolling through my private messages. Not just recent ones she'd found a way to access, old conversations from years ago. She had impersonated friends of mine on social media, sending messages to herself under fake names just to see if I'd mention her or flirt. It was disturbing, so I ended it. It was ugly. At first, she cried and begged me to reconsider. She left long, breathless voicemails sobbing and apologizing, promising she'd change. Then the tone shifted. The messages became colder, harder. "You think you'll ever be happy without me?" she hissed in one. "I made you. I know you better than anyone. You're nothing without me." I blocked her, changed my number, even talked to a lawyer about a cease and desist. But eventually, the messages stopped. Weeks went by. I thought maybe she'd finally accepted it. Then I found the first photo. It was folded in half and stuffed into my mailbox. A picture of me at my old apartment, standing on the balcony in my gym clothes, drinking from a water bottle. I recognized it. It was one of Sarah's, taken months before the breakup. But the edges of the photo had been burned. Not all the way through, just enough to char the corners, to leave curling black scars along the edges, like whoever burned it wanted to send a message, not destroy the image entirely. I tossed it, trying not to let it get to me. But a week later, another photo arrived. This one was different. It showed me inside my house, at my kitchen table, typing on my laptop. The same eerie, burnt edges. I was sure I'd never seen that photo before. It wasn't one of hers, which meant it had to have been taken recently, which meant someone had been watching me, photographing me through my own windows. I checked every curtain, every lock. I even bought a security camera system online and had it set up within the day. But nothing turned up. Just my usual comings and goings. I started, leaving lights on in different rooms to make it look like I wasn't home alone. Then my dog, Rocky, began to change. Rocky's a big Labrador mutt, friendly, goofy, never scared of anything. But suddenly, every night around 3 a.m., he'd leap up from the foot of my bed and start barking at the windows. Every single time, he'd face the same one, the narrow living room window that faced the back tree line. His hackles would rise. Sometimes he'd growl, low and trembling. I went outside with a flashlight more than once. Nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no strange sounds. But the barking continued night after night, as regular as a clock. One afternoon, I came home from work, and there she was. Sarah, sitting cross-legged in the middle of my backyard, just staring. She didn't say anything, didn't wave or smile, just sat there like a child in time out, her eyes fixed on the house, on me. I opened the door and shouted at her to leave. She didn't move. I called the police. They arrived 10 minutes later and took her in for trespassing. I filed for a restraining order that same week. She was released with a warning and a court date. They told me not to worry. "She'll stay away now," the officer said, trying to sound confident. "Just make sure you document anything else." Things went quiet again. Weeks passed. I started dating someone new, Tessa. She was sweet and kind, and had this gentle way of grounding me when I started getting too in my head. I hadn't told her everything about Sarah, but I shared the basics. She was sympathetic, not judgmental. Then came the mannequin. It was Tessa who found it. She'd gone for a jog through the woods behind my neighborhood, where an old trail looped near the creek. She came back pale and shaken, clutching her phone. She showed me the photo she'd taken. It was standing between two birch trees half hidden by brush. A mannequin, pale-skinned, plastic, faceless, but dressed in the exact outfit that Tessa had worn on our first date. The same yellow sweater, the same jeans with the tear at the knee, even the pink Converse sneakers. We went back together, but it was gone. That night, I got a voicemail, unknown number. 23 seconds of silence. Then, at the end, Sarah's voice. Barely a whisper. She'll look better burned, too. My blood went cold. I contacted the police again. They took a report, but with no evidence and no direct threat. There wasn't much they could do. She's playing games, they said, sick ones. But unless she steps over a legal line again, our hands are tied. I bought motion sensors, reinforced my doors, set up trail cams in the woods behind the house. Tessa stopped coming over for a while. She was scared, and I didn't blame her. The burned photos kept coming once every week now. They weren't just of me anymore. One showed Rocky sleeping on the porch. Another showed Tessa's car parked in my driveway, all burned at the edges. Then, 2 nights ago, I found a pile of ashes on my front step. A small heap, barely enough to notice. But within the ash, something blackened and curled. A melted piece of photo paper. I brushed it off, horrified. It was a close-up of my face, smiling, one I didn't recognize. I haven't slept since. The police are monitoring the situation. I don't feel safe, not at home, not anywhere. But what haunts me most is not what's happening now. It's that I still have all the voicemails saved. And when I play them, if I listen closely, especially to the ones that are silent, I swear I can hear breathing in the background. Not hers, not human, just close, and watching, and waiting. Story 3. I didn't think much of her when we first met. Her name was Lena. She was quiet, the kind of person who seemed to absorb rooms rather than occupy them. We met at a bookshop downtown. She was standing in the horror aisle holding a worn copy of House of Leaves, and I made some stupid joke about how only masochists read it twice. She laughed. Softly, but it was a real laugh. That kind that makes you feel clever even when you're not. We got coffee, talked about obscure horror films, existential dread, and what it meant to be truly alone. She was smart, strange, almost ethereal in the way she spoke. People like her didn't seem built for small talk or the loudness of daily life. But with me, she opened up, sort of. She was hard to read, delicate, like something you could accidentally break just by looking too long. But I was drawn to her. We dated for about 3 months. It started sweet, dinners at her apartment, long walks at midnight, weird little traditions like lighting black candles during thunderstorms. She didn't like crowds, didn't like sunlight, preferred silence over music. She never used social media, always wore the same gray hoodie even in July. There were red flags, I guess, but they were faint, more like pale pink. Then she started crying. It didn't take much. An unanswered text, a slight change in my tone, a day when I just needed some space. I'd leave for work and find her standing outside my office building, eyes swollen, arms wrapped around herself like she'd just emerged from a funeral. "Don't leave me," she whispered once when I told her I needed a night alone. "I feel so cold when you're not near." I broke up with her after she showed up at my apartment unannounced, banging on my door at 2 a.m., screaming my name. She had smeared black eyeliner down her cheeks and was barefoot, standing in the rain. When I opened the door, she clung to my chest and whispered over and over, "I had a dream you died." I ended it the next morning, blocked her number, deleted every photo, cut it clean. Or so I thought. Months passed. I moved to a new place, got a better job, met someone new. I didn't hear from Lena, no texts, no sightings. It was as if she had dissolved back into the shadows she came from. I started sleeping again, breathing easier. Life felt normal. Until one night I woke up with the sharp, bone-deep certainty that someone was watching me. You know that feeling you get when you wake up in the middle of the night and just know you're not alone in the room? It was like that, but worse. I turned on the light. Nothing. Checked the closets, the windows, under the bed. Nothing. Just my reflection in the mirror looking back at me, pale and shaken. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a nightmare, maybe too much caffeine. But the feeling returned the next night and the next, always between 3 and 4 a.m. like a ritual. I started waking up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. Then I got a call from my friend Matt. "Dude, was that your ex at the corner near your building yesterday?" I paused. "What do you mean?" He said he was in the area for work and saw a woman just standing across the street from my apartment entrance, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up, pale skin, long black hair, said she was staring up at my window. I told him it couldn't be Lena. She didn't know where I lived. I had moved, changed everything. That night, I searched her name online. I found her new profile. She had returned to social media, but it wasn't normal. The profile was a photo of us, but not really us. It was a photoshopped image, me smiling in front of a fireplace, her curled into my side. But I never took that photo. I had never even owned that fireplace. The caption read, "He makes me feel real again." There were dozens of these, dozens of fabricated photos, me at a pumpkin patch, her hand in mine, me asleep in bed, with her face half visible behind me brushing my teeth, and her sitting on the bathroom counter. Some were so well done it made me question if I was losing my mind. Had she followed me? Snuck into my apartment? Taken real photos and doctored herself into them? I reported the page, blocked her again, told myself she was spiraling, but that it wasn't my problem anymore. Until the night I woke up and saw her sitting in the corner of my bedroom. I'll never forget it. She didn't speak, she didn't move. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped tight, her head tilted slightly as if she were admiring something or waiting. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. I just stared. Her eyes were huge and hollow, locked on me. Her face was pale and gaunt, and her hair hung over her shoulders in stringy clumps like she hadn't bathed in days. I finally grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering that someone had broken into my apartment. By the time they arrived, she was gone. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, nothing on the cameras. But they did find something in the bushes outside my window, a set of keys, not mine. When I picked them up, I recognized one of them. It was the copy I'd given her months ago when we were dating. She'd kept it, used it, been in my apartment. God knows how many times, without me knowing. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a single sheet of paper folded carefully inside a black envelope. It was a hand-drawn picture in charcoal, smudged and frantic. A picture of me, sleeping. But it wasn't just a general likeness. It was specific. The blankets bunched around my legs, the way my hand curled under the pillow. The open closet door behind me. It was the exact angle of my bed from the corner of the room where she had been sitting. On the back of the drawing were 5 words written in red ink, shaky and uneven. You don't remember letting me in, but you always did. I haven't slept since. And the worst part? Sometimes I wake up with the faintest smell of lavender. In the room. Her shampoo. She's not done, not even close. Sometimes the scariest ghosts aren't dead. They're people we once loved. People who believe we still belong to them. And no matter how far you run, they find a way to follow. Story 4. The road stretched out before me, an endless black ribbon under a sky the color of a bruised plum. I had been on it for over 14 hours, living on stale vending machine coffee and the fading buzz of an energy drink. As a traveling salesman, my life was a cycle of anonymous highways and identical motel rooms. This particular night, fatigue was a physical weight on my eyelids, and when I saw the flickering neon sign for the Trestle Creek Motel, it felt less like an option and more like a final destination. The lobby was dimly lit, smelling of old carpet and something vaguely metallic. The man behind the counter was a gaunt figure with a face that looked as tired as I felt. He didn't ask for ID, didn't make small talk. He simply slid a key card across the counter, its plastic surface cool and smooth against my fingers. "Room 217, he muttered, without meeting my gaze. Room 217 was exactly what I'd come to expect. A single window overlooking the dark asphalt of the parking lot. 2 queen beds with floral comforters that had long since lost their color, and a faint stale scent of cigarette smoke that clung to the air despite the no smoking sign. I dropped my bags by the door and was about to collapse on the nearest bed when something in the corner of the room caught my eye. Perched on a small-wheeled wooden cart was a television that looked like a relic from another era. It was a massive old CRT box with a curved convex screen and large yellow dials on the front. A tangle of disconnected coaxial cables lay behind it like dead vines. It looked as if it had been abandoned decades ago. The manager had simply told me it was for decoration. I didn't question it. I was too tired to care. I simply wanted to sleep. I lay down on the bed, pulled the stiff comforter over my shoulders, and succumbed to the heavy, dreamless sleep of exhaustion. I wasn't sure what woke me. The clock on my phone read 2:17 a.m. The room was shrouded in darkness, save for the faint glow of the motel sign filtering through the cheap curtains. A low, rhythmic hum filled the space, a sound that seemed to resonate in the back of my skull. My eyes adjusted, and I saw it. The television was on. Not a show, not a channel, just a blinding, violent screen of pure, white static. It pulsed with an unnatural intensity, casting stark shadows across the floral comforter and the chipped writing desk. My heart began to thump a heavy rhythm against my ribs. The power cord was still unplugged. I stared at the glowing screen, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. Annoyance battled with a rising sense of unease. I got up, walked over to the set, and stood before it. The humming seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. With a deliberate, forceful motion, I reached back and yanked the antenna cable from its input on the back of the set. The screen remained a glowing, humming void of static. With a frustrated sigh, I returned to my bed, watching the TV like a hawk. After a few minutes, the light faded, the humming died, and the room was once again consumed by silence. Relief, sharp and sweet, flooded my senses. It was just a short circuit, I told myself. An old TV with some residual charge or some freak electrical current from the building itself. Nothing to worry about. I closed my eyes, my mind finally allowing myself to relax. That's when it happened again. The hum returned, softer at first, then growing louder. The light flickered back to life. I opened my eyes to see the television on a second time. This time, the static was different. It wasn't a uniform blizzard of white noise. There was a swirling, grainy quality to it, a subtle, shadowy motion within the chaos. I stared, frozen, my breath catching in my throat. I could see it now, an indistinct form moving behind the screen, a figure struggling to break through a wall of electronic snow. The movements were contorted, disjointed, like a silhouette trying to fight its way out of a submerged sack. I had to get out of this room. I walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to wash away the creeping horror. I was tired, stressed. My imagination was playing tricks on me. I could almost hear the words of a doctor. "Lack of sleep, Mr. Anderson, you're hallucinating." But as I was drying my face, I heard it, a faint, strained whisper coming from the main room. It was like a voice trapped behind a pane of thick glass. The words were too quiet, too distorted to make out, but the sound itself was a plea, a desperate, terrified plea. I froze, the towel held to my face, a wave of icy coldness washing over my body. I slowly lowered the towel. The whispering had stopped. The room was now deathly silent. I walked back out, my muscles tense. The TV was off. The screen was a flat, dark mirror. I breathed a sigh of relief, a shaky laugh escaping my lips. I'd imagined it all, the static, the shadows, the whispering. But as I looked at the dark glass of the screen, a reflection stared back at me. It was my own weary face looking back at me from the dark screen. And then I saw it. In my reflection, my own mouth was hanging open, stretched into a silent scream of pure terror. My face was twisted in a rictus of fear that I wasn't feeling. And in the dark space right behind me, just over my shoulder, I saw something else, a pair of eyes. Not eyes in the normal sense. They were two small, round, black voids, like burnt holes in a sheet of paper. They weren't moving, but they were watching me. The reflection of my screaming face stayed still. The eyes didn't blink. I felt a wave of icy coldness wash over my body. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The eyes stared at me, and I felt a presence in the room that was not my own, a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed down on me. Then the TV screen flickered once. The image was gone. The reflection was just my normal, terrified face. The room was so still, I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I was alone, but the quiet was now the most terrifying sound of all. I could hear my own frantic breathing and nothing else. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bags, fumbling with the zipper, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. I fumbled with the keycard, got the door open, and ran down the hall, the sounds of my own frantic footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. I slammed my keys down on the front desk. "I need to check out right now," I said, my voice a frantic whisper. The man behind the counter, a different man this time with kind eyes and a name tag that read Leo, looked up, startled. He saw the wild look in my eyes. "Did you see it?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. "The guy who had that room before you. He kept talking about a ghost trying to get out of the TV." A chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air shot through me. What? What was he talking about? Leo leaned forward, his voice a low, confidential rumble. He was a strange one, a film collector, from what I could tell. He had this box with him, always talking about a tape he was trying to get rid of, but he couldn't. Said it followed him wherever he went and that whatever was on it wanted out. Said it was hungry. Leo shook his head, a look of genuine pity on his face. He said he was trying to find a safe place to watch the tape, a place with an old TV to confront it. My blood ran cold. The manager had mentioned the TV was just for decoration. Had the man who had checked me in been waiting for me, waiting for someone to use the room with the TV? I didn't wait to hear more. I got in my car and drove away, the rain still pouring down. I couldn't shake the image of my screaming reflection and those empty black eyes. A week later, still shaken, I did an internet search for Trestle Creek Motel and Film Collector. I found a local news report. It was about a well-known reclusive filmmaker who had disappeared from a remote motel a week and a half prior. His car and all his belongings were found, but the man was gone. There was no foul play, no trace of a struggle. The police had no leads. The news article included a photo of the missing man. The face stared back at me from the screen. It was the same gaunt, weary face of the man who had checked me in. He was the ghost that was trying to get out of the TV. Story 5. I was 19 when I decided to make the drive from my college in California all the way back home to visit my parents in Texas. It wasn't the smartest idea. I didn't have much money, my car was beat up, and I was trying to make the drive in as few stops as possible. By the time I crossed into Arizona, I was running on fumes, both literally and mentally. It was just past midnight when I realized I couldn't push any further. My eyes were heavy, my neck sore from nodding off, and every mile marker seemed to blur into the next. I knew if I didn't pull over somewhere, I'd end up in a ditch. That's when I spotted it. A flickering neon sign on the side of the highway that simply read "Motel" in faded red letters. Half the bulbs were burned out, and the arrow pointing toward the parking lot buzzed like an angry insect. It looked like the kind of place you'd see in an old horror film, the kind where you know the main character shouldn't stop. But they do anyway. I didn't care, I was too tired. The lot was empty except for two other cars, both parked crooked and coated in dust. I walked into the tiny office where an older man sat behind the counter. He looked like he hadn't moved in hours. His eyes glazed over at the static-filled TV propped on a shelf behind him. You got any rooms?" I asked. He blinked slowly, looked at me, then reached under the counter. Without a word, he slid a tarnished key across the surface. The tag attached to it read Room 6. I tried to make small talk, something about how late it was, how empty the lot looked, but he didn't answer. He just kept staring at the TV until I took the key and left. The room was exactly what I expected. Ugly, outdated, and smelled faintly of mildew. The carpet was stained, the curtains hung unevenly, and the lamp on the nightstand flickered when I turned it on. But there was a bed, and at that point, that was all I needed. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the mattress. The sheets were scratchy and cold, but exhaustion wrapped me up tighter than any blanket. My eyes closed almost instantly. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. It was soft, too soft, almost deliberate, like someone didn't want to wake the whole motel, just me. I stirred, blinked at the ceiling, convinced I'd dreamed it. My phone on the nightstand read 2:43 a.m. I rolled over, buried my face in the pillow. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was louder, still measured, always in 3. A slow chill crept through me. Who the hell would be knocking on my door at nearly 3 a.m? I sat up, listening. The air felt heavy, like the silence was pressing against the walls. I waited, praying it would stop, and then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Each one sharper, more impatient. I got up and walked to the door, careful not to make a sound. My heart thudded so hard I was afraid whoever was out there could hear it. I hesitated, then leaned toward the peephole. At first, I didn't see anything, just the dim glow of the buzzing parking lot light. Then I shifted slightly, and my breath caught in my throat. A woman stood there, her long black hair hung straight down, covering her face completely. She didn't move, didn't fidget, just stood, facing my door, as still as a statue. I stumbled back from the door, panic racing up my spine. My first thought was that it was some messed up prank. Maybe another guest trying to scare me. But then I remembered. The parking lot was practically empty. My hands shook as I grabbed the room's old phone and dialed the front desk. The line clicked, and the same man's tired voice answered. "Front desk? Yeah, someone's knocking on my door," I whispered harshly. "Room 6, some woman. Can you check the cameras or something?" There was a pause, then he sighed like I was bothering him. "Son, there ain't nobody else checked into that wing tonight. You're the only one down there." My mouth went dry. "I'm telling you, there's someone outside my door right now." Another pause, then flatly, "Stay inside your room." The line went dead. I turned slowly back toward the door. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced myself to look through the peephole again. She was gone. The hallway was empty. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring, waiting for any movement. Finally, I backed away and returned to the bed, leaving the lamp on. Sleep didn't come easy after that. Every creak of the old building made me flinch. Every gust of wind against the thin window made me think she was back. Somehow, I must have drifted off again. When I woke in the morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the curtains. I almost laughed at myself. Maybe it had been a dream, a half-asleep hallucination fueled by exhaustion. But when I stepped outside, I froze. The door to room 6 was covered in scratches, deep, jagged marks carved into the wood, running from the top of the frame all the way down to the knob. They weren't random either. They were clustered, layered, as if someone had clawed desperately at the door, trying to get in. I ran my fingers over them. The grooves were fresh, splinters still raw around the edges. I checked out without saying a word. The man at the desk didn't ask questions, didn't even look at me. I got in my car and drove away, watching the neon motel sign shrink in my rearview mirror until it vanished completely. But I'll never forget the sound. That slow, deliberate rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Like something that had all night to be let in. Story 6. I've been driving trucks for almost 15 years now. Cross-country, endless highways, strange towns that never seem to show up on maps. You see a lot when you live on the road. I've pulled over in every kind of place. Big cities, neon-lit truck stops, and motels so run down you wonder if they're still in business. But there's one night I'll never forget. One stop that made me question what's really waiting for us in those empty places along the highway. It was somewhere in New Mexico, though I couldn't tell you the exact town. I had been on the road for almost 16 hours straight. My eyelids were heavy, my body stiff, and my logbook said I needed to stop before the company started breathing down my neck. I hadn't seen much for miles, just desert and the occasional gas station. But eventually, an old wooden sign appeared on the side of the road. High Desert Motor Lodge, vacancy. The paint was peeling, half the bulbs on the arrow weren't working, and the sign creaked back and forth in the wind like it was one good gust away from collapsing. But at midnight in the middle of nowhere, you don't get picky. The motel itself sat back off the road, a long, low building with maybe 20 rooms. The paint was sun-bleached and flaking, the parking lot cracked and empty except for one old sedan parked crooked near the office. A single buzzing light hung above the doorway, casting a sickly yellow glow. Inside, the lobby was small and smelled like dust and stale coffee. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like he hadn't left that chair in years. He had pale skin, thinning hair slicked flat against his skull, and thick glasses that magnified his tired eyes. "Need a room for the night?" I said, setting my wallet on the counter. He slid a cracked ledger toward me, had me sign my name, then reached under the counter. A heavy brass key clinked against the wood as he set it down. The tarnished tag read, Room 12. "Second floor, end of the hall," he muttered without looking up. I thanked him, grabbed my duffel from the truck and trudged toward the stairs. The hallway was dim, lit by flickering wall sconces that buzzed like dying insects. The carpet was thin, patterned with faded swirls that might have once been red, but now looked closer to brown. My boots sank into it with a muffled crunch. like sand and dirt had been ground into the fibers for decades. When I reached room 12, I unlocked the door and pushed it open. At first, I thought I'd walked into the wrong room. An elderly couple sat side by side on the bed, a man and a woman both dressed in outdated clothes. He wore a gray suit that looked a size too big, and she wore a pale blue dress with lace trim. They weren't doing anything, just sitting perfectly still, their hands folded in their laps. And both of them were staring directly at me, not blinking, not moving, just staring. Sorry," I stammered. "Think I got the wrong room." Neither of them said a word. My skin prickled. I backed out, shut the door, and practically jogged back down the hall. My boots echoed against the thin carpet. When I reached the front desk, I slapped the key down harder than I meant to. "There's already people in that room," I said, "some old couple." "Room 12, you gave me the wrong key." The clerk finally looked up at me, and the color drained from his face. His lips parted slightly, but for a second, no sound came out. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling. "Sir, room 12 hasn't been rented in years." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but he didn't blink. "What are you talking about? They're in there right now." He hesitated, then stood slowly, reaching under the counter for a flashlight. His hand shook slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "Come on," he muttered. "Show me." We walked down the hall together. My pulse thudded in my ears. When we reached the door, I half expected to hear voices, movement, something, but it was silent. I turned the key, pushed the door open soon, and froze. The room was empty, not just empty, abandoned. The air smelled like mildew and dust. The curtains were moth-eaten, half torn from the rod. The sheets on the bed were yellowed and rotting, the mattress sagging under its own weight. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, disturbed only by our footprints now trailing across the carpet. There was no sign of anyone. The bed, where the couple had been sitting, sagged under decades of neglect. No indentations, no evidence of recent use. I stood there, my throat dry. "They were here," I whispered. "I swear to God, they were right here." The clerk swallowed hard, his pale face even whiter in the dim glow of his flashlight. "You should just get some rest," he muttered. Long drives do strange things to a man, but his voice was strained, like he was trying to convince himself more than me. I ended up in a different room, room 8, a few doors down. The clerk practically shoved the key into my hand and hurried back to the office without another word. The new room wasn't much better. The carpet reeked faintly of mold, the lampshade was cracked, and the heater rattled when I turned it on, but it was empty, and that was good enough. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that couple, their stillness, their wide, unblinking eyes locked on me as though they'd been waiting. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the motel settle around me, the groan of old pipes, the creak of the floorboards above, the faint hum of the sign outside. I must have drifted off eventually because the next thing I remember was waking to a sound. Laughter, faint, muffled, like it was coming from down the hall. At first, I thought it was the TV in another room, but the motel was practically empty. The laughter grew louder, closer, echoing just outside my door. It wasn't cheerful laughter, it was dry, hollow, an old man's wheeze mixed with a woman's low chuckle, overlapping each other in unnatural rhythm. I sat up, my heart hammering, and stared at the door, the sound pressed against it, seeping through the cracks, until I was certain whoever was out there was standing just inches from me. I swallowed hard, grabbed the courage I didn't feel, and threw the door open. The hallway stretched out, silent and empty. The air was cold, still, not a soul in sight. but the carpet just beyond my door had 2 fresh indentations, like the weight of 2 people had been standing there, side by side, watching, waiting. I left before dawn, didn't even bother to check out. I just tossed the key on the counter and walked out to my truck. The clerk wasn't at the desk. As I pulled onto the highway, the motel shrank in my rearview mirror, its faded sign buzzing weakly against the desert sky. I tell myself I was exhausted, that maybe I hallucinated the couple, that the laughter was just my mind playing tricks. But I'll never forget their eyes, wide, fixed, unblinking, like they were daring me to come closer, like they were already imagining what I'd look like sitting next to them, on that bed in room 12. Motels are supposed to be temporary places. You check in and you check out, but sometimes something checks in on you and follows you long after you leave. Story 7. I've always hated late-night drives on empty highways. There's something about the way the world narrows to just the sweep of your headlights, the rest swallowed by blackness, that makes your imagination come alive. Every shape on the shoulder looks like a figure. Every flicker of shadow feels like movement. But I was a broke college student at the time, and sometimes late-night drives were unavoidable. That weekend, I had gone home to visit my family. They lived 2 hours away from campus, tucked in a small town with little more than a diner and a post office. I hadn't planned to stay late, but my mom insisted on cooking dinner, and my younger brother begged me to watch a movie with him. By the time I finally left, it was close to midnight. I had an early class the next morning, so I didn't want to waste time sleeping at home and driving at dawn. I thought I'd be fine. I thought it would be simple. The first stretch of the drive was uneventful. Just me, the hum of my old sedan and the endless dark pressing in on both sides of the road. My phone sat useless on the passenger seat. No service out there, nothing but static if I tried the radio. I kept my eyes fixed on the yellow lines, the hypnotic rhythm of tires on the asphalt. It was about 30 minutes in when I noticed the headlights. They appeared in my rearview mirror far in the distance at first. Just another pair of beams cutting through the night. Nothing unusual. I figured it was someone else making the long drive home. Maybe another college kid, maybe a trucker. Out on those roads, you get used to being alone for miles, so seeing another vehicle almost feels comforting, like proof you're not the only one awake. But comfort gave way to unease quickly. The truck, because I could tell now from the height of the beams and the way they flared on my mirrors, wasn't just behind me. It was following me. At first, I tried to ignore it. Cars travel the same roads. Coincidences happen. I focused on the drive, on the white lines flashing beneath me. But as the minutes dragged on, the truck never gained, never fell back. It stayed exactly the same distance away. Too close to be random, too far to be passing. I switched lanes once. The truck switched too. I slowed down, giving it a chance to overtake. It slowed too. That's when my stomach dropped. I told myself to stay calm. My heart thudded hard in my chest. My palms slick against the steering wheel, but I tried to think logically. Maybe the driver was just nervous about passing at night. Maybe he was heading the same direction. Maybe. But it didn't feel like maybe anymore. It felt like intention. I decided to test it. At the next exit, a small ramp leading toward a farming town, I signaled and pulled off. My headlights swept across the empty sign for a gas station as I curved onto the ramp. I kept glancing in the mirror. Hope flickering in me that the truck would keep going proved me wrong. It didn't. The headlights followed, perfectly timed, taking the exit right behind me. My mouth went dry. I looped through the quiet town, past dark storefronts and sleeping houses. Every turn I made, the truck made too. Left, right, back onto the main road. Always there, always steady, For the next half hour, I drove like that. My heart never slowed. The road stretched on forever, lined with trees that swallowed the stars, no other cars in sight. Just me and those headlights, locked in a terrible dance. Sometimes they fell back far enough that I wondered if he'd finally turned off. But then, when I relaxed for a breath, they'd surge closer, too close, glaring into my mirrors. The driver never tried to pass, never pulled alongside, just lingered, watching, waiting. At one point, I flicked my turn signal and veered suddenly into a gravel pull-off, dust kicking up behind me. The truck slowed, its lights cutting through the haze, and then pulled off too, 100 feet back. He didn't get out, didn't honk, just idled there, headlights on, aimed straight at my car. Panic gripped me so hard my whole body shook. I floored the gas, skidding back onto the highway, gravel rattling against my fenders. My heart was pounding so loud, I could barely hear the engine. The headlights followed once again, calm, steady, never rushing. I knew then that I couldn't drive forever. My gas was low, and sooner or later, exhaustion would catch me. I needed help. The problem was, there was nothing out there. No houses lit, no open businesses, no cell service, just miles and miles of dark. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw the glow of fluorescent lights ahead. A gas station, still open, a beacon on the edge of the empty highway. Relief hit me so hard it nearly made me cry. I pulled in fast, swerving up to the pump island under the harsh white glow of the lights. The truck pulled in too. He didn't come to the pumps. He didn't drive away. He rolled slowly to the far edge of the lot and parked, his headlights still on, aimed in my direction. I sat frozen behind the wheel, every nerve screaming at me to move, to run, but my body refused. I gripped my phone and prayed, and by some miracle the faintest bar of service flickered onto the screen. I called 911, my voice shaking as I told the dispatcher what was happening. The minutes stretched unbearably long as I waited. The truck never moved. The driver never stepped out. He just sat there in the shadows at the edge of the lot, those headlights burning into me. Finally, red and blue lights appeared down the road. Relief surged through me, so strong I nearly sobbed. But by the time the officers pulled into the station, the truck was gone, vanished into the night, leaving nothing behind but the echo of its engine in my head. The police stayed with me for a while, asked questions, took down my statement, but there wasn't much they could do. No license plate, no description of the driver, just a truck and a pair of headlights in the dark. I drove the rest of the way, back to campus with a patrol car behind me, safe at least for the moment. But safety felt different now, fragile, breakable. Because the truth is, I'll never know who was behind that wheel, never know why they followed me, why they matched every turn, why they lingered but never struck. And to this day, I wonder if the driver was waiting for me to stop somewhere darker, where help wouldn't come. Story 8. I've been driving delivery trucks for years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the roads feel like a different world after midnight. The towns you know by day turn strange and hollow. Streetlights flicker against empty sidewalks. Gas stations glow like lonely islands in seas of darkness. And the back routes, the ones we drivers use to shave off time, become the loneliest places of all. That night was like countless others. My shift had started late, and I had a run that took me across several counties, dropping off packages to the 24-hour stops. The main highways were clogged with construction, so I opted for the back roads. I'd taken them plenty of times before, winding 2-lane stretches that cut through farmland and forest, barely lit, barely traveled. It was quiet, and quiet usually meant easy. I remember glancing at the clock on the dash 2:37 a.m. and thinking I'd be done before sunrise if I kept pace. The roads stretched out before me, lined with skeletal trees that swayed in the wind, their shadows shivering across the asphalt. The hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires almost lulled me into a trance. That's when I saw him. At first, he was nothing more than a shape caught in the high beams, a dark figure upright in the center of the road. My brain registered him too slowly, and by the time it clicked, I was already slamming my foot on the brakes. The truck screeched, the tires squealed, the cargo in the back rattled violently. My chest slammed against the seatbelt as I honked the horn, the sound shattering the silence of the night. But the man didn't move. He stood perfectly still in the middle of the lane, illuminated in the harsh wash of headlights. His clothes looked dark, loose, indistinct. His head was tilted slightly forward, shadow concealing his face. He didn't flinch at the horn, didn't raise a hand, didn't step aside. A chill ran down my spine. My first thought was that maybe he was drunk, maybe disoriented, maybe hurt. But something about the way he stood there, rooted, unflinching, made the air feel heavier in my lungs. I eased the truck into reverse, the gears grinding as I backed away. My plan was simple: turn around, find another route, avoid whatever this was. I kept my eyes locked on the figure as I slowly reversed, but the second I reached the bend in the road and looked forward again, he was gone. The asphalt stretched empty under the glow of my lights. Just road and trees, nothing else. I sat there, engine idling, heart racing, hands trembling against the wheel. He couldn't have just vanished. There was nowhere for him to go, no ditches deep enough to hide in, no driveways or trails. And yet he was gone. Relief, shaky and fragile, washed over me. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks. I told myself to breathe, to calm down, to keep moving. I shifted back into drive and rolled forward, telling myself it was over. It wasn't. Not 5 minutes later, my headlights caught him again, the same figure, standing dead center in the road. Only this time, he was farther ahead, as though he'd been waiting for me to catch up. My stomach dropped. I hit the brakes again, slower this time, too stunned to honk. He stood exactly as before, still, silent, staring down the beam of my headlights. The same bowed head, the same slack posture. Every instinct screamed at me not to go closer. I kept my foot hovering over the brake, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I thought about calling dispatch, but my phone sat useless on the passenger seat. No bars, no service, nothing. I couldn't just sit there. Finally, I threw the truck into reverse again, heart hammering, and backed away until the road curved. Then I turned sharply onto a dirt cut-through I knew connected back to the highway. My tires kicked up gravel, my headlights jittering across the trees. Anything to get away from that stretch of road. The rest of the shift, I forced myself not to think about it. I finished my deliveries, stayed on the main routes, and drove back to the depot with my stomach in knots. By the time the sun rose, I had almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, shadows, nothing more. Then morning came, and the news broke. The radio was on in the break room when I walked in, holding a cup of coffee I didn't really want. A reporter's voice drifted out, calm and measured. Authorities responded to a fatal hit-and-run late last night on County Road 16. The victim, an adult male, was discovered early this morning. Investigators believe he was struck sometime around 2:30 to 3 a.m. My blood went cold. County Road 16. The exact road I had been on. The exact time I had seen the figure in my headlights. The description matched too. Dark clothing, medium build, and indistinct face. They didn't release his name right away, but I didn't need it. I knew. I sat there in stunned silence, the chatter of my co-workers fading around me. My mind replayed every moment. The first time I saw him standing still, the way he vanished when I reversed, the way he appeared again further down the road. I had no explanation, none that made sense. Was it possible that I had seen him alive, dazed and stumbling in the road moments before he died? That he'd been struck again after I turned off? Or had I seen something else? Something lingering where it had fallen, replaying its final moments over and over on that dark stretch of asphalt. To this day, I don't know, and I don't think I'll ever know whether I saw a living man that night or something still wandering the place it died. Story 9. The first mistake was deciding to drive through the night. We were young, restless, and too stubborn to admit that exhaustion could be dangerous. My girlfriend and I had spent the entire weekend visiting friends a few states over, and by the time we were heading home, the sun was already setting. It was a 6-hour drive, and I thought I could push through. She didn't argue. She never really did when I was being stubborn. By midnight, the highway had thinned out. Towns grew further apart, lights fewer and dimmer, until we were swallowed by darkness. Just the hum of the tires, the occasional roar of a semi passing in the other direction, and the faint crackle of the old radio station we had tuned in. It was around 1:30 in the morning when we saw her. The woman was standing on the shoulder of the road, waving one arm, her silhouette illuminated by our headlights. She was thin, hair wild around her face, clothes clinging and dark. For a split second, I thought about slowing down. My girlfriend turned her head, eyes locking on the figure as we approached. "Don't stop," she whispered almost instinctively. I didn't. I kept my foot steady on the gas, my heart thudding as we passed. The woman didn't step into the road. She just lowered her arm and watched as we drove by. The image of her face flashed in the beams. Too pale, too hollow, like someone who hadn't slept in days. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than the night around us. Eventually, I muttered something about it being too dangerous, about how you couldn't just pull over for strangers on empty highways. My girlfriend agreed quickly, almost too quickly, and we left it at that. But the image lingered, that pale face, that hollow expression. Hours later, fatigue hit hard. My eyelids felt heavy, the lines in the asphalt blurring together. We decided to stop at the next rest area we saw, stretch our legs, grab something from the vending machines, and maybe switch drivers. When the exit finally appeared, I felt relief wash over me. I pulled the car into the lot, which was half empty, lit by a handful of flickering lamps. There were a few trucks parked in the distance, their cabins dark, engines ticking as they cooled. We parked close to the bathrooms. My girlfriend reached for her bag in the back seat, and that's when it happened. I'll never forget the sound of her voice, sharp, strangled, a gasp that snapped my head around. She was staring at the rearview mirror. Her hand was frozen halfway to the seat, her face drained of color. "What?" I asked, my voice unsteady. Her lips parted, trembling. "There's someone in the back." My blood turned to ice. Slowly, I shifted my gaze toward the mirror, and that's when I saw her. The same woman we had passed on the roadside. Only now she was crouched low in the back seat, her face half lit by the glow of the rest area lights. Her eyes locked onto mine in the reflection. And then she smiled. It wasn't the smile of relief or gratitude or anything human. It was stretched, twisted, too wide for her face, teeth glinting as though she was savoring something. I don't remember opening the door. 1 second, I was staring at her in the mirror. The next, I was outside the car, heart racing, legs unsteady. My girlfriend scrambled out her side, slamming the door behind her. We stumbled back across the pavement, too afraid to look away, too afraid to look closer. The car sat there under the buzzing light, silent, sealed. The windows were dark. "Call the police," I hissed, fumbling for my phone. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. When I finally got through, I could barely form words. I told them there was someone in our car, that she had followed us, that we needed help immediately. The dispatcher told us to stay outside, stay safe, and wait for officers. So we waited. Every minute stretched into an eternity. I kept expecting the doors to swing open, for her to emerge, for that grin to appear again under the pale light. But nothing happened. The car sat quiet, unmoving. When the officers finally arrived, their headlights washed over us like salvation. We waved them down, frantic, pointing at the car, stumbling over words to explain. They drew their flashlights and approached cautiously, hands near their holsters. One of them opened the back door, empty. Both officers swept the vehicle, checking under the seats, the trunk, even the glove compartment, as if someone might have folded themselves impossibly small. But there was nothing. The woman was gone. What they did find, though, chilled me more than anything. Across the upholstery of the back seat were muddy footprints, clear, distinct, pressed into the fabric as though someone had been crouching there for hours. The officers exchanged looks, muttered something about maybe someone slipping in at a gas station earlier in the night. They took our statements, assured us we could follow up if we wanted to file a full report. But my girlfriend and I knew it hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been exhaustion. We had seen her. We had seen her face, her grin, and whoever she was, she hadn't been waiting on the roadside for a ride. She had been waiting for a ride inside our car. Night drives are supposed to be peaceful. Just you, the open road, and the hum of your engine. But sometimes the road isn't empty. Sometimes it's where predators wait, knowing you're trapped in the dark with nowhere to run. Some fear fades. Real fear grows roots. Subscribe if you're ready to face what waits in the dark tomorrow. Good night, if sleep finds you.